he's got people around him. General Keith Kellogg is one. General David Petraeus is another on the military side, retired and active. And when I say active, the European command commander. And Guy Donaldson, who commands the army troops in Europe, who said he could take Kaliningrad in a matter of hours. And others in the establishment who are on his side. Most of them are neoconservatives, like I explained before. And then behind him, he's got billionaires who think that, and they're right, that the American empire is being diminished majorly. And its main enemies in that regard are China, Russia, and now I think they've added India. And that we need to do everything possible to arrest this inexorable movement of power from the West back to the East, which, as you know anything about history, is where it came from in the first place. And they will do anything to stop that. And Ukraine right now is a central theater in doing that. And by that, I mean, if you look at the railroads the Chinese have constructed under their various base road initiatives, 2 of them run through essentially the northern area, both of them through Russia, and they come out and debouch in Europe. A center one runs where it would debouch in Ukraine, but can't because of the war. And then the southern one, now active and giving everyone in this country heartache, is the one that runs through the southern part of Iran and up the Persian Gulf and into the soft underbelly of the Caucasus. This promises to revolutionize world economic business. Don't have to use the high seas where the American Navy patrols all the time. You can send your commerce over land. Chinese Pacific ports can now ship 3/4 of their commerce on these rail lines, avoid the U.S. Navy on the high seas, and cut their costs by about 20 to 27%. So this is revolutionizing world economic business. So we want to stop that. And we see Russia as an impediment to stopping that. So we're going to take her out first. And then we're going to work on China. That's kind of the plan. But
then it's more about winning than doing the right thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's, it's backed by the current world's Rothschilds, Nobels, JP Morgans, and they have no flag. They're watching this very carefully. They will jump ship if they have to. They'll probably jump ship somewhere around Lucerne. And they'll do what these financiers of warfare in the last 3,000 years have always done. They'll desert Napoleon. They'll desert us. And they're waiting to see what happens. But many of them right now, preferring the West, as it were, are behind Trump. And they're behind him with all their billions. I shouldn't say billions, they're trillions. And they want to help him arrest this inexorable shift of power from the West to the East.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, all right. Well, then we definitely know what you think about the American empire now. So then my next question would be, what are your thoughts on Russia? How do you see Russia? Because we have a lot of Russian viewers and we have a lot of Westerners that are looking to Russia and wondering, is this not the bad place? Should I see them differently? I watched The Hunt for Red October, but maybe I need to give Russia another look. Like, what is your vision of Russia? What do you think about Russia?
My vision of Russia is the picture that I have downstairs of Edward Shevardnadze and Jim Baker, Foreign Minister, Secretary of State, in a boat somewhere, I think, in Wyoming, and they're trout fishing, they're fly fishing, and Shevardnadze's got in his hands a reel made in America, and it's probably one of the best reel makers that ever lived on the face of the earth. And that's a boastful statement, but I think he was. And Shevardnadze will later say about that reel that was gifted to him at this moment, I wish our missiles were made as well as this reel is made. Wow. That's my appreciation of the end of the Cold War and the prospect that it promised. Should we be on both sides of the ocean? Should we be circumspect and wise about how we dealt with it, which was the intent of H.W. Bush and his administration. And I don't know that much about Russia, except historically. I do know a lot more than Donald Trump does because I do know the history. But I do know that it's been a torturous history. It's been a difficult history. It's been ups and downs, and it's been czars and 1917 revolution and, us trying to stop that along with the perfidious British. And that period of 70 some odd years that it sort of went into a stasis of communism. And then the spring out and our raping and pillaging and plundering Moscow, Larry Summers, Anatoly Chuba and others, Goldman Sachs. I was present when they talked about this. They increased Harvard's endowment by $19 billion by the raping and pillaging. And people say, well, how'd they do that? I said, they orchestrated the fire sales. At fees. They charged enormous fees. Goldman Sachs, they don't charge a small fee. They charge massive fees for these oligarchs to buy everything that was left of the Soviet Union that had some value to it. And they made a fortune after. And also, I think they really made a single individual who was just a little pea in a pod at that moment, very, very angry at them. And his name was Vladimir Putin. And now, Putin has been proven, I think, to himself, he's been proven that this was the way the empire operates. And not only does it operate that way in economic and financial matters, it operates that way in national security matters. It lies, it cheats, it steals, it's deceptive, it's deceiving. And so he's given up on it, or very nearly so. And that's how I see Russia today. I see them as fairly well led, competently led, much more than we are, both militarily now and not necessarily at the beginning of the special military operation, but now they, as any military will do, when it
takes time,
weeds out the dead wood and brings up the good guys.
Right.
Incidentally, one of those good guys is a Chechen, one of the really powerful leaders in the military in Ukraine, Russian, is Chechen. So I think we're at a point now where we have a standoff between what was a single country, Russia, and the alliance system, such as it is, fraying every day, of the empire, the American empire. And now we, through our strategic eras, have added China and India to that panoply of opponents out there, if you will, and possibly even 11 or 12 members of BRICS, and more in terms of what they really think of the empire. I'd say today, 2/3 of the world hates our guts. So it's a very one-sided battle right now, because we're outnumbered 3-1 at least, maybe 10-1, maybe 20-1. Because if you check the world's population, it ain't in the Western Hemisphere. 3 out of 5 of every human being on this earth is either Asian or lives in that region.
Right.
So we're looking at, throw in Africa, and you're overwhelmed in the Western Empire, and then throw in that we're alienating Latin America by and large, most prominently right now Venezuela. We don't have too many friends. So we are our own worst enemy. And I think Putin has finally figured that out, and Xi Jinping has figured it out. And they're using Sun Tzu-like strategy, Clausewitzian strategy, even in a sense. They're using that strategy and saying, okay, kill yourself, but please don't take us out as you go. Because as Putin knows, as Xi Jinping knows, when we are really up against the wall, we'll use nuclear weapons.
Well, if the West is led by globalists who are, atheists, let's say, hopefully they won't commit suicide and take the entire world with them.
Some of them are ardent Christians, allied cheek and jowl, as Mao Zedong said, lips and teeth close with Israel. They are super Zionists themselves. They're Christian Zionists. They afforded a couple of years ago John Hagee's Christians United for Israel organization, Hagee being a Dallas-based pastor. They gave the West Bank settlers $300 million U.S.
Wow.
So there's this incredible alliance between American Christian Zionists and real Zionists in Israel.
Wow. Incredible. The story, the way you tell it, which I believe is true, is terrible, but we need to hear it. We need to wake up. We need to help other people wake up. So, we first know what's going on, and then hopefully do something about it. And it's sad to hear that the first Bush, was hopeful and it didn't work out. And it makes sense to me, because I was raised by the U.S. and now I live in Russia for almost 4 years. I know in my head and my heart that these are the same types of people, and they could get along, Americans and Russians. And, it's logical, because I think that both Russia and America are giant branches that grew out of the European Christian tree, you could say. So there's no reason why we can't have enough in common to really be, healthy partners, as Putin might like to say. He refers to the U.S. as partners all the time.
My daughter tells a story. When she first graduated university, she was immediately taken into the Maryland Reserve for the Army, because she went to Georgetown University on a 4-year ROTC scholarship. So she had an obligation. Well, she decided about a year into that service to switch branches. At that point, you could go into the Secret Service, for example, and you could satisfy your military commitment. So she did. And the story is this one. She's in a hotel, and she's on the protective detail. This is in Washington, for Boris Yeltsin. And Yeltsin comes out of his room late in the evening and offers all the American Secret Service agents in the corridor a drink of vodka. And he's obviously had a little vodka himself. And they say, we can't take vodka while we're on duty. We can't. So you can't have vodka. So he insists. And they finally convince him that he needs to go back into his hotel room and drink vodka. But she says to me afterwards, she said, we did refuse the vodka, but they were decent people all around. Yep, you're right. They're human beings. They're just like us. They're human beings. They speak a different language. They come from a different country. I told her about the experience I'd had with the Russian ambassador downtown. I said, he had 3 tumblers of vodka before we went into lunch. In the reception room of the embassy, he had 3 tumblers of vodka. And then at the lunch, he had 6 or 7 more that were served to him by a special guy who had a white napkin over his arm and would refill his tumbler every time he shot the vodka. And I said, when it came time for him to give his remarks to us, I thought he would pull out a piece of paper and give prepared remarks. No, from the other side of the table, he gave one of the most coherent presentations I've ever heard by a diplomat, not missing a beat, and he never looked at a single note. So obviously they can handle their vodka.
Apparently.
And then later I would talk to him and he would say, I'm leaving. I would say, why are you leaving? It's not time for your tour to be up. He said, you don't need me and Russia doesn't need me. You won't talk to me. No one will talk to me in Washington. So I'm going home. And we haven't had an ambassador since.
Rolling?
Yes.
Did you like that clip? If so, click here. But if you love that clip, click here and watch the full video. Also remember to like, subscribe, comment, and most importantly, share before I disappear.